A significant meeting unfolded in Berlin on Wednesday, May 28, 2025. Germany's newly inaugurated Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This encounter, occurring just weeks after Merz assumed office in May 2025, was more than a diplomatic formality. It signaled a potentially pivotal moment in Germany's approach to the ongoing war in Ukraine. The discussions were reportedly intense, focusing on the urgent needs of Kyiv as it continues to defend its territory against Russian aggression. Chancellor Merz, from the outset, appeared keen to project an image of strong solidarity and proactive support, a tone that many observers noted as distinct from the previous administration. This meeting set the stage for important announcements. The centerpiece of their discussions was a landmark pledge from Berlin. Chancellor Merz announced that Germany would actively assist Ukraine in producing its own long-range missiles. This is a substantial development, moving beyond simply supplying existing weaponry to empowering Ukraine with domestic manufacturing capabilities. A formal memorandum of understanding regarding this long-range missile cooperation was anticipated to be signed by the German and Ukrainian defense ministers later that same day, underscoring the seriousness and immediacy of this commitment. Such a move indicates a deeper level of trust and a long-term strategic partnership being forged between Berlin and Kyiv, aiming to bolster Ukraine's self-sufficiency in defense. Perhaps one of the most striking declarations from Chancellor Merz concerned the operational use of Western-supplied armaments. He stated unequivocally that there are no longer any range restrictions on weapons provided to Ukraine by its Western allies. This crucial decision, Merz clarified, was not a unilateral German move, but a consensus reached among allies months ago. This revelation marks a significant departure from the more cautious stance often attributed to German policy under previous leadership. It suggests a collective Western resolve to provide Ukraine with the means to effectively counter threats, regardless of their origin within Russian-controlled territories, potentially altering the strategic calculus of the conflict significantly. Chancellor Merz concluded his public statements with a resolute promise of unwavering support. He assured President Zelensky that Germany would stand by Ukraine for as long as necessary, a commitment designed to send a clear message to both Kyiv and Moscow. Furthermore, he issued a stern warning to Russia, cautioning of real consequences should Moscow refuse to engage constructively in further peace negotiations. This dual approach of bolstering Ukraine's military capabilities while simultaneously pushing for a diplomatic resolution highlights a more assertive German foreign policy under its new leadership, ready to play a more prominent role in addressing the conflict. The approach adopted by Chancellor Friedrich Merz presents a noticeable contrast to that of his predecessor, Olaf Scholz. While Scholz's government did provide substantial aid to Ukraine, it was often characterized by a more measured and at times hesitant pace, particularly concerning the provision of advanced offensive weaponry. This caution was frequently attributed to concerns about potential escalation with Russia. Merz, however, appears to be embracing a policy of greater assertiveness and a willingness to take more decisive steps in supporting Ukraine's defense. This shift is not just in rhetoric, but is being substantiated by concrete actions, such as the missile production agreement, signaling a German administration less constrained by previous anxieties. While Chancellor Merz did not explicitly confirm the direct supply of Germany's advanced Taurus missile system, which boasts a formidable range of 500 kilometers, he did openly discuss its potential co-production with Ukraine. This is a critical distinction. Assisting Ukraine to produce such sophisticated weaponry on its own soil represents a strategic deepening of support. The Taurus system, if successfully integrated and produced, could significantly enhance Ukraine's capacity to strike high-value targets deep behind enemy lines. This development alone has the potential to reshape the battlefield dynamics, offering Kyiv new offensive options previously unavailable to them. The explicit removal of range restrictions on Western-supplied weapons, as announced by Merz, is a game-changer. This policy shift effectively unties Ukraine's hands, allowing its military to target legitimate military assets that support Russia's war effort, even if those assets are located further from the immediate front lines. Previously, concerns over escalation often led to caveats on how and where Ukraine could deploy donated systems. This new understanding among allies, now publicly confirmed by Germany, could significantly degrade Russia's logistical capabilities and command structures, thereby putting more comprehensive pressure on Moscow's war machine and its ability to sustain offensive operations. Germany's more proactive stance is also indicative of a broader evolution in the thinking of Western allies. As the war has entered its fourth year, there appears to be a growing consensus that Ukraine requires more potent and longer-range capabilities to achieve a favorable outcome. Berlin's willingness to step forward, particularly in the sensitive area of missile technology and production, may encourage other European nations to adopt similarly robust support measures. This could lead to a more coordinated and impactful Western strategy aimed at ensuring Ukraine has the necessary tools, not just to defend itself, but to regain its territorial integrity over time. Despite the intensified military support, diplomatic channels have not been entirely silent, though progress remains elusive. Russia and Ukraine held their first direct talks in over 3 years in Istanbul during May 2025. These discussions, however, involved relatively low-level officials and yielded only a limited agreement on a prisoner exchange. This exchange successfully took place over the weekend of May 24th to 25th, offering a rare humanitarian positive amidst the ongoing conflict. Yet the talks failed to broach, let alone resolve, any of the core issues fueling the war, highlighting the vast chasm that still separates the two sides' positions on a broader peace settlement. Following these initial discussions, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced on Wednesday, May 28, 2025, that Moscow was prepared for a second round of peace talks with Kyiv. He proposed June 2, 2025 as the date, again suggesting Istanbul as the venue. Crucially, Lavrov stated that Russia intended to present a memorandum outlining its comprehensive peace terms. According to him, these terms would seek to guarantee Ukraine's neutral, non-aligned and non-nuclear status. He also mentioned briefing his US counterpart Marco Rubio on this proposal, indicating an attempt by Moscow to involve, or at least inform Washington of its diplomatic maneuvering. Ukraine's response to the prospect of further talks has been cautious. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov confirmed that Kyiv is not inherently opposed to continued meetings. However, he stressed that the next meeting must yield results, adding that Ukraine had already submitted its own peace terms to Russia. President Zelensky has been more critical, accusing Moscow of deliberately delaying the peace process. He specifically pointed to Russia's failure to deliver a promised memorandum of peace terms stemming from the initial Istanbul talks. In Moscow, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov countered these claims, asserting that the document was in its final stages of preparation. The diplomatic landscape is further complicated by the involvement of other major powers. President Zelensky has publicly called for peace talks involving a Trump-Putin-me format, indicating his desire for direct engagement with the leaders of Russia and the United States, though he stated he is ready for any format. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump recently accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of playing with fire following a deadly Russian missile strike that killed 13 Ukrainian civilians. Zelensky also discussed the possibility of further US sanctions on Russia's banking and energy sectors with Trump, who reportedly confirmed that such sanctions would be imposed if Russia does not cease its aggression. The diplomatic efforts are unfolding against a backdrop of unrelenting and often escalating military action. Ukraine's military reported launching one of its largest drone barrages on Russian targets overnight into Wednesday, May 29, 2025, demonstrating Kyiv's growing capacity to strike back. This followed a period where, according to President Zelensky, Russia launched over 900 drones against Ukraine in a 3-day span ending early Monday, May 26. Simultaneously, Russian attacks have intensified, particularly in Ukraine's northeastern Sumy region, where Governor Oleg Hryarov reported that Russian forces had seized 4 villages, with fierce fighting ongoing as Moscow attempts to create security buffer zones. President Zelensky also warned that Russia is amassing over 50,000 troops along the Sumy front. This brutal conflict is now deep into its 4th year, exacting a horrific toll. Russia currently controls roughly 1/5 of Ukraine's sovereign territory, a landmass that includes Crimea, which was annexed by Moscow back in 2014. The war has resulted in tens of thousands of deaths, encompassing both military personnel and countless civilians. The destruction of infrastructure in eastern and southern Ukraine has been immense, displacing millions and creating a humanitarian crisis that continues to deepen with each passing month. The sheer scale of suffering and devastation serves as a grim reminder of what is at stake in both the military engagements and the diplomatic negotiations. Germany's new, more robust policies under Chancellor Merz carry significant potential implications for the trajectory of this protracted conflict. Enhanced military support, especially in areas like long-range missile production and the removal of strike restrictions, could provide Ukraine with a more potent ability to degrade Russia's military capabilities and potentially shift the balance on the battlefield. However, such moves also carry the risk of further escalation from Moscow, which has repeatedly warned against deeper Western involvement. The question remains whether this strengthened support will compel Russia towards a more genuine negotiating stance or lead to an even more entrenched and destructive war. On the international stage, Germany's newfound assertiveness signals a notable recalibration of its foreign policy and its role within Europe and beyond. By taking a leading position in supporting Ukraine, Berlin is stepping out from a previously more reserved posture. This shift could significantly influence European security dynamics, potentially strengthening NATO's eastern flank and fostering greater unity among allies in confronting Russian aggression. However, it also redefines Germany's relationship with Russia for the foreseeable future, likely leading to more strained diplomatic and economic ties. The long-term consequences of this evolving German stance will be closely watched by capitals around the world.